Welcome back, and I'm excited, particularly excited this morning because we are in the new year and it has started on a positive note. This is the newspaper review segment, but unfortunately we don't have the newspapers. We'll make do with we'll do the online portals, and I have with me Kofi Asari of the Africa Education Watch to help me do this. He joins me via Zoom. But we'll start. Kofi Asari, good morning. Happy New Year. Can you hear me?
Hi, good morning, and Happy New Year to your team.
Thank you very much. We are delighted to have you.
All our audience as well.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm sure they're happy to see you this morning. How's your night, by the way?
Well, not being too different from the others. I chose to do my New Year countdown at home, and so I've been home since 11:30.
Right. And how are you feeling? It's 2024. Do you feel any different?
No, it's just another day. It's another day, and I mean it's a Monday. That's it. Except that everything that makes 2024 and different from 2023 has to do with our own attitude. But in terms of today, it is just another day.
Right. Well, we thank God for life, and the fact that we are alive is the most important thing. Let's get right into it for the news review, and we'll start with myjoyonline.com. The first story, or the major story on the network, is Mahama leads Bawumia in social media sentiments, and that's a report by IMANI Africa. Now, let me read a bit of it. It says the presidential candidate of the NDC, John Mahama, appears to be leading in terms of social media reception compared to Vice President and NPP flag bearer Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. This comes ahead of the 2024 presidential elections, in which the duo are considered front runners. Now, this information comes from IMANI Africa's Public Understanding and Literacy for Sentiment and Election Pulse. Now, according to the periodic social media sentiment analysis report published in December 2023, more Ghanaians on social media expressed favorable opinions about John Mahama compared to Dr. Bawumia. The study revealed that only 9.74% of posts mentioning Dr. Bawumia or the MPP were positive. Now, if you go through the story, it also says in contrast, about 20% of social media posts mentioning John Mahama and the NDC were positive. IMANI highlighted the number of posts mentioning the NPP and Dr. Bawumia was 4 times higher than those mentioning the NDC and John Mahama. So, Mr. Asari, what do you make of the story?
Well, I think that the social media sentiment analysis by IMANI is one of the activities to gauge the direction of opinions, in an election year. Most importantly, we have actually, fully ushered in an era where a lot of the public engagement, public sentiments, and all that are expressed on social media than the traditional media or the mainstream media. And so having such analysis on social media ensures that the critical mass of people's opinions and how they are expressed, is not missing out in the analysis or in the gauging of the temperature of the people. I mean, the temperature of the opinions of people, as we inch towards an election. I think it is, if you like, very normal for social media sentiments not to favor a government in power ahead of a second term election. I'm talking about the end of an 8-year term election. It is normal. It has been so. If you follow our political history, you realize that every end of term, or if you like, every second year election, you would find that the incumbent government is always the underdog, and then the opposition party will always be the favorite. And if you situate that within our current economic context, the economic difficulties we are going through, the difficulties that led us to the IMF and all that, and how it has impacted on the quality of life, cost of living, etc., unemployment, youth unemployment, and all that, it shouldn't be too strange that a lot of the sentiments, go in favor of the NDC than the MPP on social media. Between 9 and about 20%, though it's not too wide, I must admit, in terms of the favorable sentiments. But it is understandable that the NDC would be slightly ahead of the MPP when it comes to expressing such sentiments positively, in view of our economic condition. And even if the economy was better, I still believe that the fact that we are used to, if you like, conventionally, there's an 8-year tenure for every political party. You wouldn't be surprised to see the opposition party having an edge, over the incumbent. I'm not too sure. I don't think it's a departure from what we are used to in the past 29 years or so years since we started the Fourth Republic.
Well, Kofi, interesting review by by IMANI Africa, but I'd like to ask you, you don't see any surprises in there? I know we are in an election year, and it started very early. Don't you see any surprises in there?
No surprises at all. As I indicated, no surprises. We are in the second term of the government. The government has 1 more year to go. We are used to an 8-year system where every party comes and is given 8 years to rule. And another one comes for 8 years. That has been the trend since 1992, right? And so when you are approaching the 8th year of a particular administration, you definitely would expect that a lot of these polls will benefit. I mean, the outcome of a lot of these polls will benefit the opposition party, and for that matter, disbenefit or put, slightly in a disadvantaged position, the incumbent government. And so, we've seen about three other polls already. Right. The one from Economic Intelligence Unit and the other guys, and all of them are pointing to the fact that the opposition party, the major opposition party, has an edge, or is a favorite, compared to the incumbent party. The extent to which they are a favorite is, for me, the most important issue for discussion, because it appears that, and synonymous with previous elections, there's nothing like anyone being a clear favorite, but there's a slim, margin that actually favors the opposition NDC. And as I indicated, indicators on the ground, it supports to a higher extent, such projections. But let me indicate that these are sentiments of people. My curiosity is from the fact that a lot of the social media accounts are, if you like, they are robotic accounts. The accounts that are created by people who are connected to politicians or politicians themselves. To project them in a certain manner and create a certain public opinion about them. It's their marketing strategy. So I don't know the extent to which IMANI's methodology took into account such pseudo social media accounts and the opinions expressed by them. But it is an important barometer of how people feel about the government and how people feel about the largest opposition party. And so I think that both political parties have something to learn from this result, and the extent to which they learn from the outcome will obviously improve their fortunes ahead of the 2024 elections.
But what do you really suppose that they should do about it?
Well, if you are in government and you appreciate the essence of such scientific polls. You obviously should first of all be happy that you have 1 year. 1 year is a long time in politics. And so you need to, it gives you an idea about what people think is not going too well, the sentiment people express about various aspects of governance, of socioeconomic governance or political governance, etc., gives you an idea about the areas of, of your general governance policy, and specifically, if you like, economic governance policy that you need to strengthen in order to appeal to a lot of the people who are not too happy. You want to be interested in how, the age categories, whether they are youthful or not, and then what appeals to them, what are they saying that makes what are they saying about your government, what are they saying in respect of what they're expecting that they are not seeing, for which reason the sentiments are not positive, for you, and how best can you turn the corner, more having about a year, 12 months to election. And so these sentiment polls on social media coming ahead, coming earlier in an election year, for me, it is great for the incumbent government, because you have a long time to change a lot of things, and you have the power to change a lot of things to suit or to appease or to appeal to the sensibilities of many of the populace or the electorates. For the NDC too, well, perhaps they know, they are aware that people are a bit happier than them because of A, B, C, D, E. So what is it that is driving them ahead of the MPP in respect of such social media sensitivity polls? And so if they know, then they know where to focus more to make people more happy and more interested, or to make their brand more attractive. And once you know those angles, you do more of that and less of what they don't like. You understand? I wasn't interviewed, okay, but if they, or I'm not sure I was assessed. I don't know, but if I was assessed,
well, which brings me to this point briefly before we move on to the next story. You made mention of the fact that some of these responses are robotic. They are not real people behind them. But how then do we assess real people's, opinions about political parties or the flag bearers, I beg your pardon, to be able to deduce the real sentiments of the people? How then do we get to that?
Yeah, so most of these researches are initial researches based on which further ones could be done. I mentioned that it gives an idea. It's just a first layer of litmus, about people's feeling about the government or the opposition. But it gives ground for further, deep dives to be conducted into people's perception, as expressed on social media. You want to deep dive into a particular, set of issues that you believe, based on the outcome of this survey, that doesn't sit too well, but something could be done. So you do further investigation into it, engage more of the youth, those who are prominent on social media, and then get to find out what exactly their expectations are, what is not making them too happy, and what can be done. So such researches are very important because they form the basis for further deep dive researches. The critical question I asked still remains that I'm not too sure the extent to which the sample included this many pseudo accounts we see, splash on social media, people who are virtually, sponsored by political actors to come and then propagate, their messages, and then some of them also pay to come and insult others. Let's come and misbehave on social media. I'm not too sure the extent to which the study differentiated between those pseudo accounts and then real account of real people who have not been paid by anyone to act in a certain way and who are expressing genuine, sentiments about their political party or another political party. But as I said, political parties may wish to, on the basis of the findings, take a deep dive and then see how they can improve on their level of, if you like, acceptance level, so that the more your policies are more accepted, the more you're posturing. My experience in election years, in this country is that, especially in the 8th year, a lot of the reasons, a lot of the factors that influence people's opinions and sensibilities and all that are not always economic. But they mainly bother on posturing.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
The more arrogant a government is in their posturing, the more intolerant they are, the more arrogant and intolerant they are. It brings a lot of disaffection for the people. It's not always the economic situation, and so I think such studies are important, but they are mainly important for the conduct of further studies based on which government and the leading opposition party can improve their fortunes ahead of the elections.
Right. So, Kofi, we move on from that particular story, and let's turn our attention to the Proper Human Sexual Rights and Ghanaian Values Bill. And the chieftaincy minister has been, talking about this particular bill. He says, that is Stephen Asamoah Boateng, has debunked claims that government does not support the passage of the bill. According to him, matters concerning the bill fell directly under his purview as it involved issues of tradition and religion. And I quote, he's been quoted here saying that people think that we don't back it in government. It is not true. We do. It was not initiated by the government, but my brother, Sam George, started it. I'm leading the charge on the government's behalf, and I'm backing him. I am backing the churches, I am backing the Muslims, I am backing the traditional authorities. We do not want to see this gay matter or whatever in Ghana. Never. It won't happen, he said. And this was when he was addressing congregants of Perez Chapel just last night. And Kofi, I mean, this particular bill has stoked controversy in government and even in the public domain. What do you make of this stance by the chieftaincy minister?
Well, yes. Well, I think that a lot has to do with actions than pronouncements. If government is not against the bill, then it must be manifested in government's own actions. For me, that's the most important thing. Yes, the bill is still within Parliament. I'm sure. I'm not too sure when it's leaving Parliament to the executive, but the only demonstration government can make to tell the people or to affirm what Asabi is talking about is simply, assenting the bill after it has been fully worked on by Parliament. Yes, the bill was sponsored by a group of. The group was not sponsored by Sam George. It's been sponsored by a group of MPs. My understanding is that they are from both sides of the house. But it stands as a private member's bill, so that's fine. Asabi is saying this because of the challenges we are facing with the presidency assenting to the anti-witchcraft bill, on the basis of Article 108. And many people in society, sections of society have raised issue about the interpretation of 108 and the likelihood that on the basis of the president's explanation to the Speaker of Parliament about why he wasn't happy or he disagreed with Parliament, the witchcraft bill, people are beginning to think that the president's understanding and understanding of 108 within the context of the witchcraft bill would definitely affect the president's position on the anti-gay or the LGBT bill. And I agree with them because it's the same, a law not putting a charge on the public purse thing. The same clause. And for us, in society, even for the LGBT bill, it imposes even more responsibilities in terms of investments from the public purse on the government than the witchcraft one. And if that is so, then if the witchcraft bill, which I believe imposes a much lesser charge on the public purse, has found challenges, within the context of Article 108 at the presidency, then how much more the LGBT bill, which seeks to, criminalize and even imprison, people who participate in LGBT activities. We all know that LGBT is a bigger issue when it comes to the numbers, when it comes to the prevalence of LGBT and its activity and its related activities. It's a bigger scope, involves a lot of people than the witchcraft bill. And so the likelihood that it will impose a bigger charge on the public purse is higher than the witchcraft bill. So if on the basis that the private members bill is imposing a charge on the public purse has affected the president's decision or actions on the witchcraft bill, then a similar one obviously wouldn't be too surprising when it comes to the president assenting to the deal. So those are concerns that are genuine that have been raised, and that I hope that government will have to, at this point, seek to synchronize their interest with the private members bill. Government should look at looking at the possibility of adapting the bill, okay, rather than seeing it as a private members bill that is coming before it. If government sees that bill as a private members bill,
right? So government sees
it's clear in our mind that it will not be assented to,
right,
based on the principle of the witchcraft bill, which is hinged on Article 108.
Quickly,
but let me say that I'm surprised that he didn't go further to indicate whether government was going to pass the bill or not. Government was going to assent to the bill or not after Parliament has passed it.
You think this is not from a genuine place?
Come again?
I'm asking whether the view of the minister isn't from a genuine place.
Yeah, because all we need from him is the assurance that government will assent to the bill when passed. That's all we need from him. Yeah, so I'm not too sure even if the minister has the capacity to give that assurance. He doesn't.
Right.
It's a matter that rests with the president.
Right.
But any word from the executive surrounding that bill should be towards that direction, assurances or not, so that we don't, go through all this and meet that hiccup.
Sorry, let's quickly move on to the GPRT petitioning government on the recently passed emission levy bill. And they're saying that the Ghana Private Road Transport Union has presented a proposal to Parliament seeking a reconsideration of the emission levy bill to be implemented this year. Now, the bill approved by Parliament imposes an annual 100 Ghana cedis charge on petrol and diesel car owners starting this month. The GPRTU is concerned about the additional tax burden on the transport sector and has even threatened to raise fares by at least 60%. Abbas Moro, the Industrial Relations Officer, has expressed optimism about a favorable outcome for their proposal in an interview, with City FM. And let me just quote him and then we'll quickly do this. And he says, we officially resume on January 12th from the Christmas break. So we are hopeful that the time we resume, we might have received a letter from Parliament. In an institution like Parliament, you can't write to them and they will overlook it. And definitely we shall hear from them. When we hear from them, we can continue from there. Let's hope for the best, because the country is for all of us and we all wish to live happily. I mean, if you say pollution and you say emission somewhere, I think it's the grammar that has been changed. Well, I think what they're trying to say is this, charging them for the emission or emissions coming from the vehicle should be reconsidered. Do you agree with them that this should be withdrawn?
Well, this is not a new tax. I mean, in other jurisdictions, in Europe, in many countries, they call it carbon tax. Others call it pollution tax. Has various names. So I'm barring the nomenclature. I mean, it's not too new to have such a tax. But they raise issues that I think are cogent. I don't think they are saying that the tax is not important. But they have issues with the rate, they have issues with the entry strategy and all that. I think those are issues that can be addressed, or that should have been addressed before we got here. But it doesn't in any way invalidate the process or make it quite a deficit of stakeholder support. Everyone wants to ensure that we have a progressive carbon tax system in Ghana. But beyond that, my question is this: how does collecting taxes, I mean, a straight jacket, 100 cedi from every vehicle owner a year, how does collecting such taxes, lower the emission of CO2 into the environment? How does it? That's the question I ask. And secondly, how will the taxes be applied to reduce emissions? Because you have one car that is emitting within the acceptable CO2 levels. And you have another car, like a car which was leading me yesterday, driving from American House to ARS. And the whole, around 11:30, and the whole street was dark, just one pickup vehicle. And I asked myself, so how did this car get, DVLA license and certification? You understand? So are you going to charge the person who buys a new car today, a car which is less than 5 years old? Are you going to charge the person 100 cedis, 1.6 horsepower engine, and then charge this chimney on the road 500 cedis? No. So issues of progressiveness in the tax equity immediately arises. And then the bigger question I asked earlier: how will the tax be applied to ensure that CO2 emissions are minimized and our environment much more protected? Our tax, it appears that we collect taxes. Yes, we collect taxes, collecting taxes for certain purposes, but you find out that the taxes are collected without impacting on the very objects based on which the taxes were imposed. Look at our road levies. You collect road tax, you collect tolls, and then the road on which the toll is being collected. And I always give the example of the Oyibido road. Look at the Amaya toll booth. The road is not too different from the road to Golgotha, but there's a booth there, and they've been collecting toll on that booth for years. But that very stretch is terrible. So sometimes there's a huge disconnect between the essence for which taxes are introduced and then what invariably happens after the taxes are collected. And so those are the kinds of things that I think we need to iron out and be clear in our minds that when this cash is collected, after it has been equitably or progressively deployed, when it is collected, activities A, B, C, D, E are the activities that the cash proceeds will be invested, the tax proceeds will be invested in to ensure that our environment is enhanced. But if we are only going to pay 100 cedis for the working chimney I saw yesterday to be on the road and have an unrestricted or wholesale licensing and certification by the DVLA, just because they paid 100 cedis, then we'll be collecting taxes and making revenue sense, but will not be making any impact on the environment and would have been at square one. So those discussions are very, very important for the tax to have an environmental impact.
Okay, so we do our last story on My Joy Online, and this is highlights in the educational sector, which is your purview, by the way. In the year 2023, started with the management of the University of Ghana announcing an increment of fees for the 2022-2023 academic year. And the university said the new fees were based on rates approved by Parliament, communicated through the education the Ghana Tertiary Education Commission, that's GTEC. Also later in that month, Reverend Dr. Sylvester Algaga, headmaster of Boko Senior High School, said some staff of the school were seeking transfers due to the conflict in the Boko enclave. The second half of the year commenced with the German Federal Ministry of Economic Cooperation and Development, together with the European Union delegation to Ghana, launching 16 million euros support to Ghana's technical and vocational education and training sector. The program does support to the transformation of TVET system in Ghana, was to expand structures and develop skills to improve TVET education rollout in the country. Mr. Sari, you've been in this space for, and of course, the Executive Secretary of the Africa Education Watch. What has been really your highlights of 2023 in the education sector? Has it left it in a good state or a bad state?
Well, that's a difficult question, right? Anyway, I think that it's been largely good. A lot of progress has been made in the year. Obviously, there are challenges, but I think that our performance surpassed a lot of the envisioned challenges. I think we performed better than I thought in many areas, and in many areas that we could have done better, we are still walking instead of running. Because 2023 was an exceptional year for the IMF program, we were expecting the program as usual to hit us hard on the hiring of labor, hiring of teachers. We know of the net hiring freeze policy. The IMF always, encourages governments to adapt as part of its expenditure rationalization program under a fund program. And so, yes, we expected that to hit the teacher supply hard. And then a lot of compensation-related items. We expected to see constrictions in spending. Yes, it did happen. We've seen some, restrictions on employment, but we also saw major government programs in the sector being implemented in spite of the economic challenges. We saw the free senior high school program being implemented. I think this year is a year I heard very little about food issues and students being hungry and there are no food. There's no food in the schools. We heard very little of such issues. And I think it's a pointer that funding has improved relative to the previous years. So even though there was an IMF program, we've seen an improvement in liquidity, budget credibility compared to previous years. Free basic education, we've seen textbooks, 65% of core textbooks being supplied 4 years after the introduction of a new curriculum. And I thought that was also great, even though it delayed for long. We saw some action being done on textbooks this year. We've seen a lot of action at the TVET level. It's actually been a continuum, from the past 2 years. We've seen increases in TVET in the second cycle institutions. Our TVET to secondary ratio is now over 12%. It used to be about 5% some 3 years ago. We are not seeing a trend of decline in access to secondary and technical education. We are seeing appreciation, and that is also great. We see evidence of high acceptance of policies like the free senior high school program, which is great. And so I think that the year may have had issues. We could have done better in the area of infrastructure. at the basic level. At the basic level, we did 1/10 in terms of infrastructure at the basic level. And then at the secondary level, we also saw very little activity within the infrastructure space. I know these are all due to funding challenges. Senior high school projects that are ongoing are not being completed at the pace which we expected that they should have. We still have double track lingering because most of these projects have not been completed. That's a major cause of the double tracks presence in our system. Teacher education, we didn't see too much progress when it comes to infrastructure in the College of Education. Hostel projects that government promised to have completed. I mean, government promised to complete by August as part of, the implementation of the BEd program and then the upgrading of colleges to full tertiary institutions, etc. We are in January, and the majority of the sites work is actually at foundation level. Some of the sites you won't even see a foundation. That's totally stalled.
Right.
The exception of only 3 sites. So investment in infrastructure hasn't been too encouraging, with the exception of investment in STEM, schools, and then some ongoing second cycle projects. And so we hope that in this year we'll see much more action in the area of investment in infrastructure. I'm informed that the GNS will be recruiting about 24,000 teachers. That's great. Having that number recruited within an IMF program means that government appreciates that we have classrooms with our teachers.
Right. Kofi, so we do this very fast. We move on to the graphic online portal.
I thought you talk about the UG fees. The UG fees is important. The parliament. Then
let's do that very briefly so we can move on. We are really beyond.
So I'm passionate about tertiary fees. Parliament has approved new fees. I don't think the increment is astronomical. The challenge is that the baseline is high. You need about 3,000 cedis or 4,000 cedis to be able to walk into an institution, pay your admission fee, and then sort out accommodation, or about 5,000 cedis. And the challenge is that poor people from the low-income quintile households, who have household incomes of less than 15,000 a year, will struggle to finance tertiary education. Our student loan scheme is not targeted at prospective students. It is targeted at already existing students. The challenge we are having with the free senior high school programs transition from secondary to tertiary is that about 38% of people are leaving secondary to tertiary. We must improve on that number. You can't improve on that number if you don't have a bursary support scheme that helps poor people who cannot pay these fees and become students. So we have advised the government that as it has removed the guarantor system from the student loan process and introduced a Ghana card guarantor-free one, there has to be a commensurate increase in the financing of the student loan scheme so that those who apply get funded. At present, only 60% of applicants are getting funding because of limited funds to the student loan transfer. We've also advised the government that the student loan should not target students alone. It should also target prospective students, such that if Kofi Asare from Wawase obtains admission to Legon and requires 5,000 to enter Legon, the student loan trust fund should be possible for Kofi Asare to apply to the student loan within 48 hours, get a response, and on the basis of that response, he should be able to admit to honor his admission at the University of Ghana. So that later the student loan trust fund will pay University of Ghana. That is the greatest point of need of Ghanaian tertiary students, when you have to honor an admission, not for after you have become a student. So we need a reform of the student loan system to reposition it towards the needs of prospective students, one, and strengthen its support for students, and ensure that the loan arrives in school at the beginning of the academic year, not after the academic year.
I understand these are issues you're really passionate about, but because we're a bit behind time, I think we'll have to move really quickly and do this briefly. So let's move on to graphic, and this will be really fast. This is the president himself also speaking and giving his New Year message, and he says that I wish all Ghanaians a happy and prosperous 2024. Even though our nation is not yet completely out of the woods, I am confident that with hard work and determination, Ghana will make it, and collectively we will secure our futures. Happy New Year. Mr. Asari, does this stoke any form of hope for you in this year?
Well, I have hope that things will improve. But my hope always diminishes when the president is doing the same thing over and over again and is expecting different outcomes. We must change the way we do things in this country if we are expecting, new outcomes. There have been calls from his own party, pointing to a possible reshuffle. He should listen to those calls because we've seen a lot of inaction from many of his appointees. And the talk that this is the best team, I disagree. I think that in every marathon, if you have an opportunity of changing and bringing in fresh limbs, you should never despise that opportunity. And so I think the president should listen to that and get more fresh blood in the system and keep the system running. We need to see a lot more improvement in the way public resources are expended. We haven't seen the IMF program we are in. We haven't seen significant efforts by government to reduce government expenditure and reduce the waste. We are seeing huge exemptions to companies in spite of the passage of an exemptions law. We don't. The examples of resource, the examples of spending inefficiency and waste. It's too much. It's too much to give me. To make me believe the president when he says that things are going to be, different. We want to see things being done in a different way. We want to see much more emphasis on, reducing the size of government, reducing the cost of government, spending efficiency, locative efficiency. Then we will have the conviction that things will change. And we want to see a new direction towards creating jobs than this approach of setting up funds to give to companies. And then,
all right, Kofi, I think we can now move to BBC Africa page. On the Africa page, we have Congo president declared winner of chaotic election. It says, official says, Felix Tshisekedi wins a landslide with 73% of the vote, while the opposition calls for a rerun. Also, Ugandan athletes stabbed to death in Kenya. And Benjamin, who was only 34, who reached the semifinals of the 2012 London Olympics in a 3,000-meter steeplechase, has been stabbed to death. And also the bit about Clueless on computers, the teens aiming to reboot and all that, all on the BBC Africa page. What really, briefly, your views on happenings in Africa? What do you have to say about that? Briefly.
Tshisekedi is declared to have won a landslide, 73%. And so we know how politics in that country has played. If you watch the press conference that the churches were the election monitors, and they held a presser to give their verdict on the free and fairness of the election process. And it wasn't a good one. But this is Africa. So I'm not too surprised that the veteran politician, has been declared winner by the Electoral Commission. I think that we need to, the opposition party will have, if they think they have issues, and indeed there are issues, the right quarters must be exploited, for redress. I prefer them to go to court and then contest the results based on the evidence they have that the elections weren't free and fair, than to make noise on the streets, which doesn't solve the problem. So that is my advice to the people of Dr. Congo. But I think that our electoral commission should be much more up and doing. Sometimes you read the reports of independent observers, especially local independent observers, and then you read the electoral commission's report, and you wonder whether they were monitoring the same thing. It's high time we begin to, perhaps synchronize the two views. It shouldn't be seen that the Electoral Commission's work is just statistical, put out data regardless of how the data, was obtained. And the more we appreciate that elections must be free and fair, and not just a statistical an exercise to win the statistic, the better it will be for our democracy in Africa. Because I wasn't happy about I listened to the press conference that the churches held after their election. I thought that there were widespread irregularities, and that shouldn't have happened. And so I encourage the opposition parties who are obviously not happy with the outcome to use the courts to pursue their grievances.
Right. We're grateful, Kofi Asare, for your time here on the AM show. And that's how we round up the news review segment of the show. We'll be right back after these break.